Awesome. Welcome. We're so excited to have you here tonight. We'll get started in just 1 minute. Want to let a couple of people trickle in. While you are waiting, go ahead and sign up for our free college application bootcamp. It starts in October. It's amazing. We're bringing in experts like you'll see on this panel, and it will cover every single aspect of the college application, from essays to letters of recommendation, to extracurriculars and activities, and a whole lot more. So make sure to do that. We'll drop the link in the chat. You can also go to bit.ly/applycollege or scan that QR code. Let's give it about 30 more seconds. Super excited for tonight. We have some incredible panelists for you to learn from. Excited for you to get to know them. Okay, awesome. Let's get started. If you're here, it's how to prepare for college admissions early with former AdComs and Stanford students. An absolute stacked panel, if I may say so myself. Super excited to talk about a wide range of different topics related to the college application, how to make the most of your time in high school and then in college. We'll talk about a lot tonight. Quick logistics. Go ahead and ask questions in the chat. We'll get to as many of them as we can. Stay until the end for exclusive discounts. We've got some exciting announcements there. And then make sure to sign up for Leland to access the recording. We get a lot of questions. So if you want access to the recording, make sure to sign up, create a free account on Leland, and we'll send it out. Our agenda for the night, we'll do some quick welcome and introductions, tell you who we are, who our amazing partners, Curious Cardinals are. Then we'll do a brief overview of the college application, and then we'll get into the meat of this, which will be our expert panel. And then we'll wrap up. To start with introductions, my name is Amelia. I run all content at Leland. It's my job to help you get access to the information that you need to get into college of your dream, to reach all your other ambitious goals. Love helping you in whatever you're trying to do at any given moment. You'll also see Erica and Amanda here from the Leland team. They're awesome. We could not run these events without them, so shout out to them. Jonathan, I would love for you to introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan. I'm zooming in from New York City. I am the growth lead at Curious Cardinals, which I'll tell you a little bit about in a second. But I graduated from Stanford in 2022. I was class president there all 4 years, and I studied international relations, world development, and economics. And I'm passionate about helping K-12 students realize their passions, discover them, and create meaningful projects that will help them down the line with their college applications.
I love that. Thanks for being here, Jonathan. Now to introduce you to the true stars of the show, panelists, I would love for you to introduce yourselves. Skylar, let's start with you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amelia. Hello, everyone. It is great to virtually meet you. My name is Skylar. I am a former admissions officer who currently resides in the Chicagoland area. So a lot of my experience has been in Chicago. I was previously at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business as an associate director of admissions. And prior to that, I did a lot in the undergraduate space. Most notably, I was at Northwestern University for a number of years in their undergraduate admissions office. I also do some work in the college access space. So I'm a board member for an organization called Green Halo Scholars that supports first-gen low-income students in the Chicagoland area. And I've been doing admissions coaching now for about 3 years, both at the undergraduate level and at the MBA level. So excited to chat with you and learn more about your interests in these next steps of pursuing college.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Deborah Duran. I am a former senior admissions officer worked at Harvard. I attended Harvard as an undergrad as well. I myself was a first generation college student, so I continued to work with first generation students as well. I work with a nonprofit here in the San Francisco Bay Area called SEO Scholars, which is a lot of fun. In addition to working at Harvard, I also worked as a college counselor at a top independent school here in the Bay Area. I read applications for Berkeley, both their undergrad and their MBA programs, and I have been working with students for a little over 10 years now, kind of helping them find their best fit universities. As a student, I went to Harvard undergrad and later earned my MBA from the Miss McComb School of Business at the University of Texas at Austin. That took a second, but it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alec Katz. I'm the co-founder of Curious Cardinals. And prior to starting Curious Cardinals, I was a student at Stanford where I studied aerospace engineering, where I was very involved in the GPS lab there. I had my work published in the aerospace journal there with Lockheed Martin. And so I was very into aero-astro. I never thought I'd be in the education space, and started working with a high school student originally on math, and what that turned into us building a portfolio of different cool projects that ultimately I think were core to helping him get into college, but also helping him find his North Star of what he wanted to pursue. in the future. And so, yeah, excited to be on this panel and sharing any insights I have from one, interviewing probably 1,000 different high achieving college students and having spoken to many students that didn't know what they're passionate about and ones that had a clear direction. Katie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie McKinley. I'm an operations and product manager at Curious Cardinals. And prior to that, I graduated at Stanford in 2021 with my bachelor's in neuroengineering and my master's in data science. And even prior to that, I was a competitive athlete and a middle college high school student. So started taking college classes really young. Before Curious Cardinals, I've been in the educational consulting world for around 4 years, working with families on school placement. And I've also volunteered with Stanford in trying to figure out if we're going to let students in during the interview process in the fall. So I am really excited to share some of my thoughts.
Cool. Thanks, panelists. What an incredible wealth of knowledge that we have to draw from tonight. People, ex-students at the best universities in the world, and then admissions committee experience too. So excited to learn from you all this evening. You now know us. We would love to get to know you a little bit better. So answer in the chat, where are you dialing in from? What year are you? And then what is your dream school? It's fun to see where everyone is from geographically. We've gotten people from probably every country in the world at this point. Come on, don't be shy. New York represent. San Francisco. Okay, we've got some Bay. Monterey, California. Okay, San Francisco. Austin, Texas, Deborah. We've got some Austin representation. Connecticut. Very cool. Keep them coming. We would love to get to know you, and we'll keep reading the chats. Quick introduction. If this is your first Leland event and you don't know what we do, we are the one-stop shop to help you reach your goals, whatever your goals may be, across career, admissions, and tests, and a lot of different other areas. We have over 750 experts like Deborah and Skylar on this call that you can work with one-on-one and get personalized help on whatever it is that you're working toward. We also host a ton of free community events like this. Make sure to sign up for Leland to get access to future of them. We love bringing in the community. And then we do CBCs, live cohort-based courses or boot camps, like that college application boot camp that's coming up in October. Highly recommend that you check it out. I think my favorite part about working at Leland is the joy of like actually helping people accomplish their goals. We every day it feels like someone is getting into the school of their dreams or landing their dream jobs or aced a test or just feels like they're improving in some ways, and that's really awesome. When you reach a goal in Leland too, you have an entire team that is just your hype and on your side, just a really big fan club. So we would love to help you reach your goals. As you can see, we've helped people get into the most competitive companies and organizations and schools in the world, and we would love to help you as well. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have this upcoming boot camp. It's completely free. Highly recommend you do this. It is so nice to have some kind of structure to help you with this application process. I think it can feel very overwhelming. There's a lot of moving pieces, as we'll get into tonight, and to have experts that are coming in and guiding you through each stage is incredibly valuable. So highly recommend checking that out. Just some of the things that you could do with a coach, if you haven't heard of coaching or have never worked with a coach: application strategy, end-to-end coaching on whatever you need. If it's like an admissions and you have someone walking you through kind of each step of the way, activities editing, essays from brainstorming all the way to outlining and editing, ACT, SAT tutoring, whatever you need help with, we have an expert who can help you, and we'll personally match you to someone that matches your background and goals. With that, I'll turn it over to our awesome partners for the evening, Curious Cardinals.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan. I do community at Curious Cardinals, and you might be wondering, what is Curious Cardinals? So we are a dynamic education platform. We have 650 mentors from the best universities in the world: Harvard, Northwestern, Stanford, all the universities that you've been hearing today, talking about on the Zoom. And we match students that are in grades K through 12 with a college mentor to meet once per week to create amazing, meaningful passion projects or to receive personalized academic support. So what this is built on is A, the best match and connection; B, structured and measured sessions; C, consistency that compounds; and D, just the true nature of inspiring the love of learning. So when a student comes to us, whether their interest is video games or sneakers, they know their passion or they have no idea what it is, we ensure that the match made to the mentor is someone that reflects their identity, that holds true to them, whether that's having immigrant parents or loving anime. It's someone that can match their personality and someone that can really bolster their strengths and help them grow their weaknesses. So an example is a student came to us that just wanted to resell sneakers, and his parents were like, "That's not a very academic project. I don't really know how to help him resell sneakers. So for the past 6 months, I've actually taught him finance, Excel. He's a 7th grader who's like coding and predicting the market in spreadsheets, and he's starting a sneaker business now. And that leads us to our 2 tracks that we have. One is academic mentorship, and the second is passion projects. So academic mentorship is tutoring, but we say tutoring is the T word at Curious Cardinals. It often reads as impersonal or a band-aid solution, whereas we believe in the consistency of long-term mentorship, and Rome wasn't built in a day. You can build executive functioning skills. Parents often worry about nagging their students and stay on top of their work. And our mentors are there to build your confidence. It's really someone who's just a couple years older than yourself that you see yourself in. And passion projects are all about learning by doing, creating remarkable deliverables, and mentors who hold your student accountable. So that looks like building a drone, like Alec mentioned, or if you're a sophomore in high school who likes video games, coding your own video game and launching that on the website, so that by the time you get to your college applications process and are meeting with these amazing college counselors, you have an amazing portfolio of projects that are authentic to you and authentic to your actual passions to bring to the table, not just doing projects to tick boxes for what you think college admissions are looking for. And our impact so far is we've taught over 60,000 hours. We have 1,000 plus mentors in our network from the top schools, and we worked with over 5,000 families. Our mentors go through a rigorous process of hiring, and they're passionate about education. And on average, mentors are working with up to 3 students. So if you're a high schooler, middle schooler, parent of a student who's interested in pursuing their passions or discovering what their passion might be, work with the Curious Cardinals mentor to take that interest and make something amazing out of it. So by the time you're working with the wonderful people over at Leland, you have a pretty amazing portfolio to show them of what you've been doing in your high school years.
Thanks, Jonathan. I love that. As you can see, we both deeply believe in this principle that you should find people who can help you reach your potential. And through both of our companies, you have access to an incredible range of expertise, and would encourage you to take advantage of that. Okay, quick overview of the application. If you like just open the Common App or an application, you're like, whoa, what is going on? Some of the things that you should be thinking about in college, or sorry, in high school: strong grades. I looked at the average GPA at Harvard, it's 4.0. At Stanford, it's 3.95. ACT, SAT scores are just as high up there as well. Activity section, they want to know, what have you been involved in? Awards and honors. Letters of recommendation. Do you have teachers and other individuals in your life that are willing to vouch for you? And then essays, which I think for most applicants is the scariest and the hardest part. We'll cover all of these tonight. So with that, let's dive in. I want to start with a little bit of a higher level question. Panelists, I would love to hear all of your answers on this. Oh, sorry, this is for the people in the chat. What part of the application process seems to be the most daunting? And I saw we have some parents in here. So parents, you can answer for yourself or on behalf of your kids. But let us know what feels the scariest right now. The essay, yep, that's pretty common. They are hard. I still have nightmares when I have to do the essays. Standing out, I think that's a very common concern as well, getting started. Great first step. You are here. You have gotten started officially. The essay for sure, yep. The essay, well, I'm seeing some themes here. We'll definitely get into some of these. Let's jump into the panel and want to start out with this high level question. Panelists would love all of your thoughts on it. What is your best tip for applying to top universities and standing out in the process? We already said that we already got in the chat that it can be hard to differentiate yourself. Skylar, would love for you to kick us off on this one.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things I would say to this. The big one, though, is that so much of this process is storytelling. I thought it was really interesting that I saw so much like essay in the chat right now, because I always think that, what I can help families the most with is really building an application narrative. The truth is, as Amelia said, anyone who's going to be admitted or admissible to these programs is going to be top tier academics, top tier testing, going to have amazing extracurriculars. It really comes down to how do you package this? When I was in admissions, I would spend on average pretty much anywhere I was 8 to 12 minutes on an application. And I'm curious, Deborah, if you spent more or less time than that, but it was pretty quick. So you don't have a lot of time to make your case and to grab the attention of an admissions reader. So every part of this process, there's a strategy and there's a narrative that can be told, whether it's through your extracurriculars, essays, what you choose to major in. All that tells a story about who you are now, who you're going to be on campus, and who you're going to be when you leave. And I think that's what's really compelling to admissions offices. So that would be my best tip, is to think about the story you're telling in your overall application narrative.
Thanks, Skylar. I absolutely love that. And we'll get into why and how you can play that narrative across different parts of your application a little bit. Katie, would love your thoughts on standing out.
Yeah, I think it's a trifecta of intellectual vitality, which is such a gushy word, but Stanford at least talks about this a lot, where whether your interest is crocheting or neuroscience, you need to be in the top 1% of your certain interest. And you need to pursue that with a depth that is historical and also showing that you really care about this to a degree that is not just affecting you as a person, but in a perfect application is also affecting your community.
Oh, that's great. A lot that we can jump off from there as well. Devry, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I will just go ahead and echo everything Skylar and Katie have said. Absolutely. I guess I would add to that authenticity, right? So when you're building that narrative, when you are building out your extracurriculars, are you doing things that you really do care about? Because if you don't care about them, or you're doing them because you think you have to, or your parents are making you, or you think you're writing what the admissions officers want to see, it's just going to fall flat. Yeah, we don't have a lot of time, or as a former admissions officer, I didn't have a lot of time to read these applications, right? 5 minutes to 20 kind of max, probably, if I was slow that day. But we don't have a lot of time to get through them, and so you really have to get to know a student very quickly, just from what they have written, from what others have written about them. So getting a sense of who they are as a whole person, having that authentic voice throughout the application is everything. So you want to do things you care about, you want to know who you are. That makes everything else in this process a lot easier.
Thanks, Deborah. I love that. I think a lot of people go into this process, myself included, thinking, how can I paint the picture of the perfect student, the one that I know they will admit, when that is not the most helpful way to approach this. It's more of like, no, who are you? It's time to dig deep and uncover some of those things. Alec, you want to ring us out on this one?
Sure. I mean, everything everyone said, I totally agree with. I guess the one thing I'd add is substance. It's really difficult to kind of make up a story if you don't have substance to really share how you've gone in depth over time. And so encourage people to really start thinking at a young age. In middle school and high school, these essays are coming. And so it shouldn't be a black box of like senior year, summer, trying to figure out what am I going to do to write about it. It should be a manifestation of what you've done over an extended period of time. So really building substance and then showing authenticity in how you've gone about it, I think is my advice for how to stand out.
Yeah, that's great, panelists. Strong start, strong start. Want to start going into some of the specific areas of the application. Letters of recommendation, I think a lot of students have anxiety about, because you can't have direct control over it. It's a lot of relinquishing control to someone else and hoping that they write something that paints you in the light picture. Devry, would love your admissions committee perspective on this. What kind of has distinguished the best letters of recommendation that you've seen? How can these students select and prepare their recommenders adequately?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically you want to ask teachers that you've had later on in high school versus somebody who maybe you had in 9th or 10th grade, just because it's closer to when you're applying. You've grown a lot since 9th grade. But if you've had somebody who's taught you twice, taught you 9th grade and 11th grade, that could be fantastic. If they were your coach and also your 10th grade English teacher, that could be great. But you want two academic teachers to write for you, and you want to ask people who like you, first of all, people who you got along with, and definitely teachers who you got to know, and classes where you participated in that class. The grade is less important if you happen to get a B plus. Goodness, gosh forbid. But if you really got to know this teacher, you worked hard, you had conversations with them like they were a real person, you helped others, you did some pretty cool projects, like those I think are typically the best teachers to ask. You want somebody who can add more than, Deborah raised her hand, she was always polite, she got a good grade in the class. Yeah, I already know that, right? I know that from your transcript. So I'm looking for new information here, what it's like to teach you, what you're like around other people, what you're like as a student, what it's like when you're not in class, if you're, out sick for a day, does that change like how the discussion goes? So definitely you definitely want to help your teachers out, and you want to ask them well in advance if they can write for you. I always say ask at the end of junior year before your teachers go on summer break. That way, if they so choose, they can get a head start on them over the summer. If you ask them in the fall, it's really pushing it. They're super busy. These take 2-3+ hours to write. So you want to give them plenty of time, and you want to give them a brag sheet, or you want to give them kind of a quick kind of reminder of what you enjoyed about their class. This is where you can kind of, trigger their memory in a good way, where you're like, oh, I, really liked our conversation about, this book. I, had a lot of fun doing this lab. Kind of help them remember when you were pretty awesome in the course. I think that can be really helpful. And then also just give them a quick kind of overview. This is what I'm applying for. This is why I'm applying. Here's some fun facts about me. So they can add a little more kind of humanity to that letter as well.
Yeah, I want to highlight something that you said that I think is super important, and that's and it goes back to what Skylar said at the beginning of, you can think about your application a little bit holistically. There's a lot of different things that go into it. And so what unique perspective can your recommenders add that is adding something that's net new to your application instead of reiterating something that's already on your resume, that's already in other pieces of your application? I think that's great. Katie, any thoughts on letters of recommendation? How did you approach this yourself? How can people do this in the best way possible?
Well, Devery absolutely crushed the recommendations there. I think being really strategic in who you ask, like not everyone is a good writer, even if they're a teacher. So just knowing that, you want to be able to ask someone that has a really good voice, that knows the laws of grammar, because that directly reflects back onto you. In addition, I think always providing some high level aspects of what you want to feature on your application, so that the letter of recommendation can either strategically, depending on what you want, align or feature different things that you didn't feature in your application, because it is such a game of like how much space there is in an application, and you don't really want to be beating the bush. If you wrote an essay about a certain hobby you've been pursuing since the age of 4, your letter of recommendation should strategically feature other things that you've done to build a holistic picture of yourself.
Thanks, that's great. Highly recommend that brag sheet too that a couple of coaches have alluded to. Skylar wrote that he has one, would highly recommend reaching out to him. I'm sure it's excellent. Moving on to essays, which as we saw is scary and daunting and hard to approach. These are the essay prompts for 2024-2025 application cycle. Take a screenshot of them. If you don't, you can find them online as well. We're gonna spend a couple of questions talking about essays because we know how important they are. First is, how do you recommend choosing a topic for the personal essay? Are there certain things that I should stay away from? Skylar, would love your AdCom perspective here.
Well, the first thing you can do is hire me or Devery to help you out with this process, because having a great coach goes a long way. But I think there's a few things to think about with this. To me, it's not so important the what you write about, it's the why you wrote about it, right? And I think, there are different ways to approach this. One is to think about that application narrative that you're telling throughout your application. I always say you want to weave that through your writing supplements in some capacity, right? So I was working with a student a year ago. She ended up getting into MIT regular decision, rock star math student. But this kind of narrative that we leaned into was also this passion she had for gender equity, right? And we talked a lot about this intersection between gender equity and math. And so we were really intentional about, weaving that passion for both of those throughout her writing supplements to make sure that narrative rang true. So for her, we leaned into that in her Common App prompt, but you don't have to, right? Ultimately, you want to show something to these readers, and I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record because I leaned into this before. You want to show them something about who you are now and who you're going to be on their campus and who you're going to be beyond. And there's a lot of ways to tell that story, but you want to think about, how am I showing this in a way that's not shown elsewhere on my application? I always tell people the writing is like your beachfront property in the application process, right? Like you get to build your own house here. This is prime real estate in an application. So you want to be really thoughtful about this. So those are some of my tips. I think thinking about your application narrative, how you're weaving that through, and also thinking about what is something I want to show to these readers that I haven't shown elsewhere in my application.
Thanks, Skylar. Can super attest to the potency of a coach. I have seen essays be transformed, unrecognizable after a little bit of polish from someone who knows what they're doing. Alec, would love your perspective on essays and choosing the right topics. And yeah, anything that you've seen that maybe I wouldn't do?
I guess my guidance is like, you should know what you're going to write about for your essays, like in junior year or sophomore year, and have like a clear, it's like usually there's the Common App essay and then there's the supplements. And so these should be a manifestation of like what you've spent the most time going deep on. And so my advice would just be to figure that out and map it out early. And so say you're like in debate going into junior year and you're part of the club. It's like, what's your goal for standing out in this club throughout junior year in a way that you're not just gonna be another kid writing about your experience in debate on these essays, but instead have a very clear picture of where you want to be a year from now from when those essays are being written. So I guess my advice here is just intentionality and trying to figure it out as early as possible. Don't wait until like, don't open the Common App for the first time when you're starting to write it. Like start to think about this from an early age, and work backwards from what are your goals to get into college, to have the right topic and substance to be able to share lots of substance here.
Thanks, Alec. I think that advice is great for across the board. If you can think about building relationships with your recommenders as early as possible, if you can get involved in activities as early as possible that you're really passionate about, it will help you later on. But if it is fall and you just opened the application for the first time, don't stress. You can do it. We're here to help. You can still put together a great application. But if you're early on, great. You're in a good spot. Okay, Devery and Skylar, going to you for this one. How do admissions officers evaluate personal essays? And then what kind of has made the cream of the crop rise from the others? Skylar, I'll posit this to you first.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because I think you'll probably hear in our answers that schools handle their review process a little bit differently across the board, right? When you think about the categories that you're evaluating on, usually in some capacity, it's academics, extracurriculars, communication, or writing supplements, demonstrated interest overall. Some capacity, that's what they're looking at, right? The writing supplement typically is evaluated similarly with like a ranking scale. At Northwestern, we use like a 1 to 5, with 5 being the lowest, you can get 1 being the highest. And really, there's a couple things that we're trying to pull away specifically from the writing piece. The first piece is writing level, right? Like, can you write at a college level? Are you at least high school level? But, for your most selective schools, they want to see that you're prepared to step in day one and be a really strong writer. So I think that's kind of first and foremost, can you write? And then also, like, what's that so what? I can't tell you how many times after an essay we've written like mostly narrative, doesn't add much to the application, right? Because they're telling a story, but they're forgetting to share like why this story matters. Like, it's great that grandma was super inspiring to you growing up, but why does that matter to me as a Northwestern admissions officer who's considering admitting you or not admitting you? So I think that piece is really important too. I would also say like a writing supplement, and hopefully this will take some pressure off of you. The writing supplement is important, and I don't want to minimize that. I mean, I told you it's beachfront property. It's the first and only opportunity you have to really show your voice in this. But when you think about the components of the application, I would say, you can get past with just a really well-written essay that maybe isn't like the most dynamo part of your application, right? So if you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I don't have this adversity, I don't have this really, really cool narrative, the biggest thing is show them you can write and show them that you can be successful at that. So I think those would be some of my notes. I'm curious to see what Devery has to say and how it differs or is similar.
Yeah, Skylar, but before I'm excited for your thoughts, Devery. Quick follow-up question, Skylar.
Yeah.
What's the balance between being a high schooler, and of course you want to be college level, but like having your unique voice and not wanting to sound overly scripted versus having that kind of polished, like you don't want to stray into academic writing territory, right? So how do you find that balance?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I do think, I know I kind of jokingly said hire a coach, but I do think having some third-party person who can help you like tread that line of showing personality, because this is a great opportunity to show personality, right? And I like my clients to kind of lean into that. but not at, the expense of like really good writing. So I do think it's a fine line. You want to make sure grammatically, spelling wise, your sound, the structure of your essay is sound, but don't be afraid to throw a little joke in there or a little like, joyful energy in there. I think all of that can read really positively too.
I love that. Devery, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so yeah, definitely a second what Skylar has to say. I mean, I think first it's, yeah, is it grammatically sound? Can the student write? Is it easy to read? Does it flow? All of that, of course. Does it add new information? I think is pretty important. Does it humanize the application? Are we getting a sense of this person? It's important to remember that at this level of, I guess, selectivity at the most selective colleges that they are building communities. The admissions officers aren't just looking for students, and they are looking for what you're going to be like in the classroom, if you have intellectual vitality, how you're going to be involved in extracurriculars, and how you're going to be as somebody's roommate, right? So they're trying to get a sense of you throughout this entire application. And so your personal statement should highlight characteristics, values, experiences that are so integral to who you are. They're not going to come up elsewhere in the app, but they're so integral to who you are that if you didn't include them in here, it would feel incomplete. It would feel like we're not really getting to know you. And I have a sense that that probably sounds pretty like heavy, but it's not. It's like if something's essential to you, like if something's really important to you, it could be as easy as like a tradition that you have, a favorite book and why it's significant to you. Like there doesn't have to be any grand, huge like revelation at the end of now I'm going to cure cancer kind of thing. That's not what they're looking for. They really are looking for your voice, to get to know you, to be able to imagine you as a whole person and have some kind of takeaway in the essay, right? Have something that the admissions officer can hold on to so that when they are presenting your case in committee and they're talking about all these amazing candidates out there, that they have something to remember. They have something to say, oh yeah, like, oh yeah, Skylar, yes, oh, he wrote that really like touching but funny essay, about his, I don't know, about something from senior year, right? Like, and so you want to find a balance of new information, personality, and like just helping them have something to remember you by.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think digging, as you're hearing a common theme, I think among some of these answers is digging deep. It's like, who are you uniquely? And I think it's worth spending a good amount of time before you even start writing and do some self-reflection. What do you care about? What kind of leader, what kind of person do you want to be on a college campus? What do you want to do after? What problems do you want to solve? What are you excited about? What do you like waking up in the morning and doing? Answering some of those questions, I think will give you some good fodder to start with your essays. Jonathan, I loved your point about you wrote 450 iterations of your essays. I think that's a very common. My first essay was trash. I burnt it. Like it was so bad. Can you talk to me about that editing and polishing process and what you would recommend for others?
Yeah, I love everything that everyone said. I also wanted to give a +1 to Devery. Not everything has to be the deepest thing ever. One of my supplementals was about my camera roll on my iPhone, and that's just what it was, and it got me into Stanford. So trust that it's okay to just write for who you are. My essay at least went through 450 drafts and edits. Whenever I started it, I had an idea of what I thought the college admissions panel wanted to read, and I had this other nebulous bubble over here of what I thought was accurate to myself. And the more I started to try to write with the framing of this is what they're going to want to see to admit me, the more roadblocks I would hit. And so I was a big like whiteboard, post-it notes on my wall, ideas, words, what inspires me, what do I love, what am I passionate about. Spoiler, ended up being like public speaking. I like did a lot of public speaking in high school. And I had a metaphor that I really liked that a mentor had told me about my own journey. And I was like, I love this metaphor. It sounds super fluffy and weird. I don't know how to use this in my personal draft essays. I think on probably round 80, I said, scrap that. Let me just try to write something and speak it out as if I was talking to my mentor or my parent or my teacher about who I am and why I'm passionate about public speaking and going out of your comfort zone. And that is what led me to the next 300 drafts. And that's the essay that I kept going with. This first 80 drafts or whatever. And I say draft as in like one sentence is edited, etc. Like it's not too intense, everyone. Don't be super scared. When I was writing for the admissions panel rather than for myself authentically, though that bit of writing is what I scrapped. And when I wrote for myself authentically, that's what I kept. And that's what I started iterating on to get to that 650 word personal statement that's really hard to nail down to. And then everything I couldn't fit that I thought was still authentically me or that they might want to see, I put it on the back burner on my post-it note wall and said, where can I fit these into my supplemental essays? And then that's how I used my personal statement to then influence where my other essays would come from. And it worked pretty well for me.
Thanks, Jonathan. Super helpful. And I love the point about like voice. I worked with a lot of students, and the first draft is a voice memo. They just go on a walk and like speak their thoughts, speak their story into it. I think that can feel a little bit less intimidating than sitting down and trying to write, a full story. So that can be a great way to get started if you feel like there's that initial hurdle. Thanks, coaches and panelists. Lots of great insight on essays. Want to move on to activities and extracurriculars, specifically in the Common App. How we've talked a little bit about this, choosing ones you care about, but want to dig a little bit deeper. What are the tips for filling out the extracurricular activities section? How can I make sure that my list stands out and is unique and authentic to me? Alec, would love your thoughts here.
Yeah, so I think this comes down to not trying to, when you're writing your essays, it has to be like, you can't look at this essay and think this is any other student at your school. And so for me, that was really thinking hard in 9th, 10th grade. What are the things I'm doing? I'm so busy, and everything I'm saying yes to is something I'm not going really deep into. And so for me, that was two things. When I quit soccer in 9th grade, I thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I was lost. I was like, this is what I'm spending all my time on. What am I going to do with all this free time? But that really allowed me the time to reflect on what are the intersections of what I'm good at, what I care about, and what type of impact I can have in the world. And so two of those things were, one, aviation. I was able to get my pilot's license, and not just get my pilot's license, I was able to do physics research at UCLA. I was able to volunteer where I was flying patients in rural areas to hospitals, and really go deep into those areas, to which it wasn't just like writing like part of the debate team on my activity sheet. It was like won this award for volunteering with an aviation organization. So anyways, I guess that's my main piece of advice, which is like, really identify what are the things that you're spending your time on. Kids are so busy, so overscheduled. And if you're just doing it just to do it, eliminate it and really stand out in a specific area. And you don't need to fill up the whole 10 activities on the activity sheet. Show who you are and be authentic in that section.
Thanks, Alec. I appreciate that. I also think if you're passionate about something and you want to be there, the chances are you're going to do cooler things, you're going to care about it, you're going to go further, you're going to find unique ways to approach it. So it will benefit you if you're limiting it. I think a lot of us like to say yes to a lot of things. So I love that reminder to narrow it down to what you actually care about and want to focus on. Katie, would love your thoughts on extracurriculars and activities as well.
I think my story is slightly different because I grew up being a very competitive athlete with coaches who were gold medalists. I don't know if any of you watched the Olympics, but I think Stanford was one of the highest rated quote countries in the Olympics because they have a great athletic department there. And so I had my one thing that I really devoted a lot of time in, that was softball for me, and I was in the top 1% for that. A lot of schools also in the recruiting process do this interesting thing where for the recruiting class, they take test scores and they just need to get an average score across a couple kids that meets the benchmark for the school. So I was recruited after decommitting to a school my sophomore year of high school to Stanford to help raise that class's ACT score average, in addition to contribute to the team. And so I think for extracurriculars, it needs to be something that you've put time in historically, whether that has been a YouTube channel, that has been theater, something that you have committed long endurance to, and that you have gotten to a certain echelon at. I think like the only way you get to a certain caliber is by loving something and then being okay at iterating and taking feedback and learning from other people. So whatever that is, it doesn't matter the topic. It could be writing fan fiction even, right? Like focus on what you care about and what you've spent time towards, and you will reap the benefits from that.
Thanks, Katie. That's great. Devery, I think a lot of the tips that have been shared are especially helpful if you're a little bit earlier on in high school. Would love your thoughts on, okay, I'm applying this fall. I have my list. How do I narrow it down? How do I make sure I'm highlighting them in the best way possible? What can I do right now with the application?
Yeah, so I mean, I think make a list of all your extracurriculars if you haven't already done so. Think about everything you've done in high school, from summer programs to jobs to maybe you took an extra kind of online course or went to a lecture. Maybe you started a club, maybe you're helping out at home, you know, just kind of think about everything, kind of everything that you've done. All right. And then you want to think about, where have I really committed my time and what has been the most significant to me? And I'd probably try to rank them, right? Like if you have 12, rank them in order of importance to you, because you're going to be asked to do that on the Common App. Typically, like for me, but every admissions officer is going to have a different opinion about this. Like for me, I always like, it's like the top 3 that are kind of the most important to me in terms of, or even the top 5, like what's on the first page of of your Common App when it's printed out. Like I like to see the things you've been really involved with, and hopefully the things that you've probably had the most leadership in or the most impact in, kind of closer to the top. But you know, I don't want something just from 9th grade at the very top, right? That's, you know, wondering why you didn't, you know, can kind of continue with it, that sort of thing. But, you know, I would just rank your activities based on how significant they are to you. Sometimes you can, you know, sometimes if they're really close to each other, you can combine them. But you don't have to fill everyone out. Like you don't have to have 10 apps, you know, don't have to have 10 activities. And if you have 20, I understand that can be hard to narrow down, but try to think about where you've had the most impact, leadership, and where you can really highlight what you've done. Because when you only have 150 characters, you don't have a lot of space. So you want to be able to, you know, just give them a quick highlight reel of, you know, I founded, I earned, I fundraised, I initiated, right? So you need to really think about, where can I like really show them how I made this organization better, or how I did really well in something? And are they going to get a sense of what I really care about as well?
Yeah, thanks. Erica's reading my mind in the chat. Impact is something that you'll hear on a lot of these panels from a lot of experts. And it's important for a lot of reasons, but I think one thing it's helpful to think about how the AdCom is viewing your application. Impact, if you have made an organization better, like Devery just mentioned, well, the likelihood is that you're going to come to Stanford and you're going to make Stanford a better place. And so then it's great for Stanford or whatever university you're applying to admit you, right? Because if I admit you, you're going to come and you're going to make us better in some way. So if you can show that you've done that in your past, it is an excellent indicator that you will do it in your future. So anywhere you can show impact, highly recommend doing so.
Amelia, we've been on this for a long time. I have one quick note here.
Yes, please do.
When you're thinking about your extracurricular list, I think there's like a quick thing to think about when you're ordering this. And that's to remember that leadership and recognition drives, and individual recognition drives an extracurricular ranking. So when I'm working with my students and we're thinking about this list, and you're trying to figure out what is the most impactful, look for those things that give you leadership, look for those things where you were individually recognized to lead with, and look for those things that support the story that you're telling in your application. So, you know, things like, you know, being the captain of your, you know, basketball team is going to be more impactful than just being a member of your club soccer team, right? You're showing that leadership piece, right? Recognition, being all-state on the all-state orchestra individually is going to be more impressive than maybe a passive club involvement. And finding things that support that story you're telling in your application, like that student I referenced earlier with the gender equity and the math, looking for those activities that also support that story you're telling. That's a good way to think about, what are my most important activities on my list. So I just want to say that really quickly.
No, Skylar, I appreciate that. I think that's great. What Jonathan mentioned too, of like, use Post-it notes, you know, what are all the things that you've been involved in, put them up on a wall, rank them like Devery said. Okay, what's for my essays? What are for my additional activities? What's on a resume or whatever else? Where else can I include it in my application? I think visually that's really helpful. Skylar, I have heard you speak about this next one before, and I think you have some great insight. So I would love to actually go back to you on this one. if I have a lower ACT score, a lower ACT score, or even if my GPA maybe is lower, how can I kind of offset maybe a piece of my application that feels maybe like an X mark?
Yeah. That's a good question. All of your most selective schools for the most part are going to talk about doing this holistic review, right? That there's a lot of components that are factored in when making a final admissions decision. To be honest, though, what I tell my students is that first hurdle you got to clear is the academic hurdle. You got to show them that you can be academically successful. So I think, yeah, if you're feeling like, testing wise, you're not quite hitting that mark where you need to be, investing in resources to help you test prep. I know not everyone has access to that, but hiring a good tutor, doing some additional test prep outside of school can be really helpful. Identifying those schools that are still out there that do test optional admissions, or like a UC application where they review you test blind, can be helpful. We're kind of swinging the opposite direction on this, though. Deborah, as I'm sure, as a former Harvard AdCom, Harvard kind of led the charge on re-emphasizing standardized testing post-COVID. And I would argue this never really stopped being important, to be honest with you. Most of your most selective schools are still taking a huge chunk of their class, even if they're test optional from test emitters. So it's kind of just like the crappy reality of this process. Now, I think having a strong application narrative, having a really good application strategy too, can also be helpful, right? When you think about choosing the right early decision school, if you feel like you're not quite as competitive academically, I mean, being really targeted with what school you're going to apply in ED and increase your chances maybe from 4% in regular decision to 25% in early decision, right? I think that strategy can be really helpful. But also just remembering there are 4,000 colleges and universities out there, and there are more than just the top 20 that are very, very academically selective. I would say is the other piece to that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. I think a lot of times you go into this application, you're like, it's ride or die, this school, but no, there's plenty of excellent educational institutions that you will be more than happy at outside of just one place. Devery, from your position on that Harvard admissions board, with standardized testing and very competitive test scores, how did you admit anyone with a low ACT or SAT score? And then if so, how do they offset that in the rest of their application?
Yeah, I would definitely say like lower, right? Like a place like Harvard, they can do what they want, right? They've got a lot of incredible applicants applying, and so they can pick who they want to pick for the reasons that they want to, right? And so they're looking for excellence kind of around the board. And so if you're slightly weaker in an area, you need to make up for it elsewhere in the application, right? So if you're weaker in standardized test scores, then they really want to see that you have kind of aced all your classes, you've been challenging yourself, you're taking rigorous curriculum, right? You can still do the work. If you have slightly lower test scores or maybe a slightly lower GPA, then hopefully you're bringing some exceptional extracurricular with you. Maybe you're a recruited athlete. Maybe you are going to be on the debate team. Maybe you've done something pretty remarkable. So if you're slightly weaker in some areas, you have to make up for it elsewhere. And most colleges are still test optional, right? We still have several colleges at the top that are test optional. And you can still submit AP scores, right? If you have AP scores to submit and they're strong, definitely send those in. So even if you're applying, to a place where maybe a lot of your classmates are going to be sending scores, but if you can send a bunch of strong APs and they can know you can handle the workload, like that can be a really good substitute for schools that don't require the SAT or ACT. So, I would say also get started early when it comes to testing. I know that's easier said than done, but get started early and figure out which test is for you, right? Don't try to do both the SAT and ACT. Take a diagnostic test for both, figure out what works best, and then focus on that, right? Because if you do it, sometimes it's like, oh, let me take the ACT after you've taken the SAT 4 times, and you're like, dang it, I should have been doing this all along. So start earlier and try to get it out of the way as kind of, I think, honestly, early, like late sophomore year, early junior year would be awesome. That way you can concentrate on everything else. But do plan on taking the test, but do know that there are other things you can do to try to make up for a lower test score.
Thanks, Devery. I think one thing we'll recommend is take the ACT and the SAT just blind right when you start, as early as you can. and kind of feel out the vibe of the two tests. You know, which one do you score higher on? Which one do you pace better? Which sections feel better? It will give you a good kind of preliminary direction. This is also something, though, if you do have a low ACT, a low test score, a low GPA, whatever, this is something that a coach can be extremely helpful with, because they can look at your application holistically and say, okay, maybe you're a little bit lower in this one area, but you're super spiking here. So let's go and focus on that and polish that and make it as strong as possible. So an outside perspective can be really helpful here. Jonathan, I saw your story in the chat. We'd love for you to extrapolate a little bit on that. How did your sister approach this? Yeah, what was that like?
Yeah, she was really worried, honestly. I mean, it wasn't too low, but it was lower than what she would have liked, right? And she came to me as her mentor about, you know, how she should approach. Should she even apply to USC? Should she even apply to these schools that she was interested in, because it was a little bit lower than average? And I said, you should absolutely still apply, because of what you've done in high school shows that you are not only capable, but that you will, like you said earlier, add a lot to campus and to this university apart from your scores. Your GPA is wonderful. You have amazing recommenders, and ultimately you have a really wonderful story. Like, you founded the only club that's ever existed in our town for special needs students. Your brother has special needs. Your younger brother has special needs. You sort of acted as a caregiver and really accelerated your own like learning process through being out in the field, working with like homeless youth who have special needs, and can speak to that over your entire 4 years of high school, to a degree that you can't even put the number of hours you spend on it in your activity sheet. You have a very deep empathy for people, and you know that about yourself. Let's lean into that. Let's show them who you are, why you want to study psychology at USC, to start your own practice and help more students like this. And if that's not enough to get you in because of your ACT score, then that's not enough. But let's give your all and work together to show who you are outside of that score. And it worked. She got it. So I think that I think an encouraging person to say it's okay, and to say focus on your passion projects, show that while, you know, I wasn't studying for the ACT as much as I should have, I was out here doing real impactful work. That's going to mean a lot to the college admissions counselors that are reading your essays. And, you know, we took that bet and it paid off. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's also great that she had a mentor to help guide her through that, right? The power of mentorship once again. Okay, additional information section, excuse me. I think this is a big question mark for a lot of people. If I don't feel like I have anything to write, should I, just to fill up the space and add more things? Skylar, what are your thoughts on the additional information section?
Do not do that. That's my advice. I don't know, maybe others disagree. I'm a pretty big stickler on, like, if you don't need to use it, don't use it. I'm not a fan of including additional activities and honors in the additional info section. Schools, Common App, like, they're intentional about those 10 activities and those 5 awards and honors. And I think being selective about that is also part of this process, and being concise with your activities. So I would not use it that way. That's probably the most common way I see it used. I wouldn't write an additional essay. I've seen that before, where they're like, I'm just going to throw another personal statement in there. That's not going to play well. Really, you want to use the additional information section to provide additional context to something you didn't have a chance to provide context to in the application. So let's say, you know, mom and dad got divorced sophomore year, really emotionally tough time for you. We see a dip on your transcript during that year, but then we see it pick back up, and you've got this upward trend after that. Maybe using the additional information section to address that and to speak a little bit to why that dip happened, and kind of reiterating that once things settled, you were able to bring your grades back up. Having that reinforced by like a counselor in their rec. Like, that's kind of the way you want to use this. As opposed to just filling it out to fill it out. So that would be my take on it. Curious if others have additional thoughts.
Yeah, does anyone have, I just want to open it up to all the panelists. Does anyone have strong opinions here outside of what Skylar added?
I mean, I think additional information is definitely one of those things that is going to vary from admissions officer to admissions officer. You don't want to repeat information in it. I'm okay if a student elaborates a little bit, like maybe on an extracurricular or a project they're not going to be able to talk about elsewhere in the application and not in a supplement. Like, I get it if they want to add a little bit more. I just want it to be easy to read and organized. No essays. I want it to be just factual, right? Like, so I want you to tell me about like what was happening at home. I want you to tell me about a scheduling, you know, if you had a scheduling conflict, or if your school does some kind of weird grading and you just want to make sure we know. Absolutely, you can use it. But if you really don't have anything to say and everything's pretty straightforward, don't just use the space to use it, right? Like there's still like the COVID section still exists. What is that? The community disruption section that still exists. Like pretty much almost no one needs to be using that anymore unless there was something that dramatic happened during COVID. So with the same thing with the section. If you don't really need it, don't use it. But if you have context to add, if it's an integral part of your story and you don't want to write about it in your essay and you just kind of want to tell us about it, great, do it there. But it's not an essay, it's facts.
Thanks, guys.
I want to jump in really quick, if that's okay, and build off of that. I think something else is I went to a high school in Tennessee that didn't have a great math program. So I used the additional information section to say, I would have loved to take calculus. It was not offered not only at my high school, but any university around me that I could have taken it. So I'm not like, I used it to basically like give a context to the courses I was able to take. So I think that could be a good section if your school has a particular leaning away from STEM or arts or towards STEM or arts, and there was curriculum that you really wanted to take but couldn't for some reason. I think that that's something that you could elaborate here in the section.
And I just want to add, similar situation. I went to a middle college high school, and for those who might not know what that is, it looks different in different places. Sometimes it's a free floating group of students that are basically taking community college classes. Mine was an actual high school built on the campus of a community college, and I elected to go there because I wanted to take very advanced courses. And for me, the district I was in did not subsidize AP tests, and those were $90 a test. Doing the math, I was like, oh, I could take $33 courses, a bunch of courses for $33. And so if you have any sort of financial limitations on why you elected to choose a certain high school program over one that was the more like typical choice in your district, I think it's always good to elaborate upon that.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate those perspectives. Again, something that a coach or an expert can help you figure out whether you need to or not to write. We have one last question, but before we get there, I've heard some awesome things from Katie and Alec, particularly in the early high school years. I would love to open it up to the Curious Cardinals folks for the people that you've matched with mentors or all of these kind of high school age kids that you have seen. If they're early on in high school, what should they be doing now in order to prepare themselves for a really strong college application down the road?
I would literally open the Common App and see what are all the questions, and then work backwards from there, and then ask yourself, what am I doing that's really core to who I am, and not just checking another box or showing up to another extracurricular activity. Say no to as much as possible so that you can really stand out in the core areas that are true to who you are. So I'd say just like know what you're working towards, have a clear goal, and work backwards from there with clear substance to which you can fill.
I appreciate that. I think most of us open the application when we are starting to think about the application, which is senior year. So that's great advice. Jonathan, Katie, optimizing most of high school.
I wanted to add in, I think that we feel really passionate about those early high school years because that is what we do at Curious Cardinals. I have talked to hundreds of students that don't know what their passion is. If they start to work backwards from the Common App, that doesn't really help them get past that roadblock of, but what do I do? There's only so many things I can do at my high school. There's only so many clubs. That is why we do what we do, right? If your high school doesn't have an electric car club, will match you with an engineering major at Stanford so you can build an electric car company and learn CAD engineering if that's what you're interested in. So I think it's about looking for those resources outside of what might just be readily available. Take the initiative to find how you can pursue a project that you're actually interested in, even if it's not something your school might offer on a plate or a platter. And yeah, you can visit our website if you'd like to learn more about getting matched with a mentor for free to create one of these awesome projects depending on your interests.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'd also say like explore, especially in those first early years. Like you don't have to know that electric cars are your passion. If you do, that's awesome and props to you. But I changed majors a bunch of times. I've been involved in STEM, humanities, and so many different things, and just try different things and see what sticks and what you like. Katie, would love your thoughts on this as well. Optimizing for those early high school years.
I think that you need to collect data on what you like and what you don't like. It's totally fine to live in the intersection of STEM and humanities. When you get to college, you'll actually realize how much of the social sciences are using either STEM philosophies or actual like STEM coding, data science, things like that. And it's not such a binary world of STEM versus humanities. But I think for you to be able to really utilize your time at college, and as a first generation college graduate, something that I wish that I had exposure to a little bit earlier is just playing a little bit, like getting your hands dirty. I knew I was interested in STEM, but like many students, I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. And I did some research, but not a whole lot. And so like trying on as many hats as possible to really fine tune your algorithm so that, you know, college, it's 4 years. It doesn't have to be 4 years, but you know, a lot of schools don't have financial aid programs after 4 years. So maybe there is some pressure to hurry up and finish in 4 years time, right? Trying to figure out what you like, whether that be through Curious Cardinals mentors or experimenting on your own, I think is super powerful and something that will help you get results that you want.
Thanks, guys. Super, super helpful. Wish this was a resource that I had in high school for sure. Okay, want to close out the college application process. Hope that you have learned a lot. I know how I have. I wish I could go back in time and apply again. What is one final tip that you would hope that every attendee on this call walks away from? And this could be something new or an iteration of something that we've said so far. Alec, I'm going to start with you.
Start early, be authentic.
Great summary. Jonathan, what about you?
I'll keep it short too. I think find your North Star. Love this word, North Star. If you don't know what it is and you're a senior right now, that's okay. Do some reflection, do some thinking. Talk to those teachers that you've asked to recommend you. Ask them, hey, what do you think is the best thing about me? I'm struggling to get through these essays. Like, are you willing to work with me and think about like all the things I've done so I can like make some progress and finding out like what my application should be around? You'd be surprised at how many people that care about you would love to support you in that way if all you do is ask. So I think if you don't know what your North Star is, it's not too late to find it. Search through the recesses of what you've been doing, what you care about, who you are, and try to get away those external expectations you might have on yourself or that people might have on you to create and write an application that is authentically you, who you are, and what you care about.
Thanks, Jonathan. That's great. Katie?
Going to do a little bit of a different take. Having volunteered and done over like 40 college interviews for Stanford, if you get to an interview, if you do get to interview for a school, make the most of that opportunity. Do not be late. Know what you're going to say. Know how you're going to differentiate yourself against the 100 other kids that are going to have interviews, and you know, really seize the moment.
That's great. Yeah, we didn't talk about interviews. Not every school does interview, but if you have an interview, it is also, I would argue, maybe not beachfront, Skylar, but right next to it. It is excellent real estate to make the most of. Devry, what's your top tip?
Yeah, like just introspection is a huge piece of this, right? In order to be authentic, you need to know who you are. So throughout your life, but especially in high school, you need to ask yourself why. Why am I doing this? Why is this important to me? Like, you need to know why. Why? Because you're going to be asked that in the college process, right? Why do you want to study this? What are you going to do with it? Like, and it can't just be because I'm good at it, right? I've always been a STEM person, so I guess I'll do this, right? No, you need to think about why. You need to think about your why. It's going to really help you figure out where your priorities lie and how to actually spend your time. So ask yourself why, check in with yourself, take some notes on it when you do check, when you do check in with yourself. And that way that can hopefully give you a little purpose.
Thanks, Devry. Skylar, bring us home.
Yes, I'm going to take a slightly different approach on this. So this is something I used to always say at the end of my presentations that I try to communicate a lot now. And that's that it's not lost on me and all of us on this panel that like this process is not the most fun process, right? And that it's stressful. There's a lot of pressure on students, on parents. It's vulnerable. You're putting all this stuff out there to let other people like me and Devry say, are you good enough to come to this institution? And what I just want you to know is that you're going to be okay. If you are someone who is taking the initiative to go to a panel like this, you are the exact type of person that's going to be successful in this process. If you are someone that is at all competitive for the types of schools that we're speaking to in this panel, you're going to be a rock star. There are over 4,000 colleges and universities. You are going to find that place that is perfectly suited to you. So my tip is to, take as much as you can, some of that pressure off yourself, and know that you've already done the work to be successful. You've already done it. And now you just got to present it. And you got to find that school that's going to be lucky enough to have you on their campus. So that would be my take-home advice. You're on mute, Amelia, just to let you know.
Good to know. Thank you for stopping me before I got too far into my rant. All I was going to say is everyone on this call, like, these schools would be lucky to have you. The last thing I'll say to bring us out is get help. You do not have to go through this process alone. It's so scary and intimidating, but there's people here that can help you and that would love to help you. Coaches, panelists, thank you so much. Everyone is here of their own volition. If you could join me in thanking them in the chat, I'd really appreciate it. Panelists, thank you so much for your time. I learned a ton, and I hope everyone else did as well. If you are ready to get started with coaching, or if you want just like some kind of help navigating this application, knowing what to go, would recommend setting up strategy call in Leland. We're happy to help you, or work with a coach like this. Once again, thank you for being here. Panelists, thank you. Curious Cardinals, thank you. You guys are a rock star partner. We'd love to do future things. Thanks everyone for being here.